literature journey, somewhere someone has just completed a thesis that sounds just like yours. Well, yeah, that's disappointing. Why didn't you know about it? Why didn't you know that? Why didn't you go to the meetings where you could meet those people? Why didn't you follow through the network that says somewhere, maybe it's another university, you could have met that person? I just found recently there's someone in my own faculty at York St. John, York Business School, who's working on a topic that I've just started a piece of research on. And I should have known it. Yeah. This other person is like me, only in 1 day a week. It so happens I never met her. It so happens I never sat down and had a coffee. And found out that she's working on a topic which is very close to something that I'm working on. Okay, so in introducing the themes of today, I'd like to suggest some possible frameworks and ways of looking at your field. And I'll do that by introducing, because they're not here, some of them are not here because they work on Saturdays. That's very simple, isn't it? Because they're registered part-time. If you're seriously doing a doctoral thesis, you have to live, you have to sleep, you have to eat. And how do you provide the money for that? Most people don't have a scholarship or fellowship that provides them with the full support. So I know that many of my students are registered full-time, but they're working. And if they're not working during the week, they're going to be working at weekends. So here I've got a little group of 5 people. So see if this touches any bells with you. This is a new group. All of these people, apart from one, are in the first year of their doctorate. The one person in the third year is part-time student who is researching on negotiation styles amongst mid-career Arab managers in the GCC countries. And she's using nice technique of videoing the start of negotiating meetings, because what she's concerned to provide some new knowledge on, and if you like, the most original part of this is she wants to know, how do Arab managers start? Now, have you ever done business in the GCC world, the Gulf area, the Gulf region, so in Bahrain, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, Ajman, these places? Any of you worked in there? Yeah. Working, you never have. You're in a meeting with Sheikh Mohammed, Dr. Fahad and Dr. Islam. How do you know when the meeting starts? Because they're talking, they're making polite words and so on. When did the meeting start? And after half an hour, someone may say, I think I understand. And you say, oh, I didn't say anything yet. Do you think that these guys, they work in a different way? Yeah? Arab managers seem to work in a different way. It's quite hard to know when you actually started, because sometimes nobody sits down and says, shall we all sit down, ladies and gentlemen? No. You're in a diwan, which is a big room, and some people may sit down and talk to other people. Some people are still walking around the room, and apparently you decided something. And you think afterwards, what did we do? What did we decide? So that's her area. What is it about negotiating in the Gulf that's so different? And can she see visual clues of this starting a negotiation behavior? So that's one topic. Then I have a young man from Bangladesh, and he's working on a topic which is incredibly important, particularly in the textile industry in Bangladesh. How many people here from Bangladesh? 1, 2, 3, 4 people. Well, 5 people. One thing about Bangladesh that we see in the newspaper is factory accidents. Yeah? Yes. It's a phenomenon. So he's a brave young man. He thinks he has access to some companies. some of these companies are controlled by relatives of his, so of course he can have access. And he's a brave young man to ask him a tough question. Why in our company did we have these accidents? Yeah? And he's framing it in an interesting way. Because someone will say to him, oh, you don't understand, Cousin Said, you don't understand, because we're trying to make money. We're not trying to do good things for some professor in York. We're trying to make money. What he wants to demonstrate is if you make money this way, you lose money and you kill people. So it's such, let's call it a meaty topic, right? It's a solid, strong topic. So that's the second person who's working with me. Then I have two other people. They didn't know each other before they came to work with me. One of them is a 55-year-old, very experienced international aid consultant who is Lebanese and is working on, has spent most of her career working on water sector issues, right? And she's worked both for host and donor communities. She's away this weekend, otherwise she could have been here, because she's substituting for another consultant on a project in Iraq, but not just in Iraq, in Kurdistan. So she's taking a plane. You know, you can't fly direct to Erbil from London. Yeah. So she has 3 changes. And of course I'm her supervisor, and with the co-supervisor I said, it's got to be dangerous, you know, that you have to do it. Yeah, I have to do it because I'm substituting for a good colleague and he will trust me to do the work he would do. And he is ill, he can't do it, so I have to do it. Okay, I understand, a network of obligation and so on. And I said, but it's still a dangerous place, you know, it's still classed as a war zone, actually. And she said, oh, it's okay, David. I shall be okay. They're providing an armoured car for me. So I'm thinking, it's so safe, you have to be in an armoured car. This, how do I sign off that I did my role as a supervisor? Let her go there. But she's going. She's determined to go. I have another, again, young middle-aged man. Everybody is young to me, you understand, right? You all look young. Even you, Dava. You look young, yes. Well, you are young. And he's a Palestinian. Now, I've done a lot of work in Palestine. I've done a lot of work for the Ministry of National Economy. And it's a kind of interesting economy. By the way, do you know what percentage of the gross national product of Palestine is aid money and remittance money? I'm going to give a prize to the person who gets within, say, 5%. What percentage?
8%.
No, you're not allowed. You're not allowed. You might know the answer. Right. Okay, guys. What percentage of the GNP, gross national product, in Palestine is aid money?
70%.
70%. Who said that? I have to give you a prize then. But it is. It's over 70%. It's about 73%. Well, how can you live and work in an economy where the economy is actually aid money? So aid money is very, very important. Now, I mentioned these two students together because their issue is exactly the same. What they're both trying to do, the doctoral thesis on why, when there is so much aid money going into certain developing economies, why doesn't the aid money go to the projects that need the aid money? Because you can actually track this. $100 that go in, perhaps $5 in some venues is going actually to the project. And the rest is going to support salaries in the ministry. This is the case in Palestine quite often. Or to support the support of salaries in the ministry, or to support the consultants from donor countries who are put onto the project to monitor how the work is done. But the work isn't done because they're taking their consulting fees out of that money stream. So that's a live topic that we're working on. And the final person who's started to work with me is working on a project that again may be interesting to you. And I'll start by asking a question. How many people understand what is halal? What is halal? Tell them quickly, what is halal?
Which is permitted by Islam.
Permitted by Islam. Very good, succinct definition. What is permitted by Islam? Let's ask the question. Is halal a brand? Is there a brand identity for halal? Now, I started working on this topic 5 years ago in Liverpool with a young woman called Aisha Ijaz, who unfortunately got ill and didn't complete the thesis. But we're working on what is sold as halal within the Liverpool Muslim community. And what is halal? And how do they test it? And how do you communicate the identity via a branding operation? Right? Well, I'll ask you a question. The way I ask the question will tell you what the answer is. Is everything that comes from Saudi, you might say, oh, Saudi, everything that comes from Saudi must be halal, because the Saudis are very tough. Right? Is it true? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
People believe it.
But it's not true.
But I think not true.
It's actually not true.
Yeah.
There's many, many things if you adopt. So this is what the Imam in one of the mosques in Liverpool tells people: if you are in doubt, consult the list provided in the synagogue of what is kosher, because those people have better tests than we do. My God, is halal a brand? If I'm saying to the manufacturers of a deodorant product, is your deodorant halal? They will say, we don't know, but please go to our biggest competitor and ask them if it passes their test. If it does, it's halal. If it doesn't, it's not. So what is halal? It's what is kosher. Well, this is not a satisfactory scientific conclusion, my friends. So I'm working with another person who's also Palestinian about this, because there is a politics about halal. You know that. There's a politics about what is halal. And there's money to be made if you can say something is halal, even if maybe it's not. But let's, not research that too much. Well, we want to research it, and we want to research how do SMEs in Palestine deal with the problem of creating brand identity. Yeah? And that's going to be a very, very interesting piece of research. I spoke long enough just to tell you that in the community that you're part of, we hope that you're going to be part of an interesting network, going to learn from each other, and principally this morning you're going to learn from 3 top experts. Each of them will introduce themselves. I'm going to pass on now to Professor Lynn Boutel from Plymouth University, Plymouth School of Management, I guess, yes. And we've known each other, I guess, 10 years, something of that sort, yes. 10 years. Indeed. How long is it, Dava, since you did your thesis?
2006.
8 years.
8 years. But I knew Lynn a little bit before that. Yes, yes. So the network is growing. Should we stay up here, or should we go and sit in the audience while you guys are talking? It's going to be Lynn first, then Professor Peter, then Professor Nazrul, sorry. Should we move to...
We
should move there, because
we should move. You're going to be in the screen, otherwise you're only going to see our big heads in a way. Okay? Thank you and welcome. Is that one yours or that one?
No, it's yours.
That's right. Okay.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you for your introduction. Yes, I'm Lynn Boutel from the University of Plymouth, and as David has just said, I was Dava's PhD student supervisor a very long time ago. My interest is in international strategic management, but I'm interested in how that works at very local levels. So at the moment I've got research projects looking at agricultural technology in farming, in small scale farms, in fairly peripheral areas. So peripheral in the United Kingdom is Cornwall, but we've also got researchers who are working in Argentina, in Chile, in the far south of Italy, which is also underdeveloped, in a fairly undeveloped part of Spain, in France, and in Poland. So it's a major project looking at similarities and differences between these ways in which technology can be applied in agriculture. So big, broad brush stuff, but also small details. Small farms, farmers who are reluctant maybe to adopt any form of technology, who perhaps think only of how to put their produce, vegetable produce or whatever, on a lorry which will then go to the local supermarket, and don't have any kind of strategic plans for their business at all. So this has got me thinking about the issue of scale and scope. And I've just got a few ideas which I think are controversial. I don't take sides in this controversy, I just offer them as ideas. First of all, I wanted to start off by saying that I think it's true to say that everybody within business and management world is probably in favour of innovation and think that innovation is a good thing. And if we look at patterns of innovation, we tend to think that the thing that actually triggers innovation frequently is connections. So we need these connections to actually encourage people who have ideas to get together and think of new products or new processes or new strategies. So innovation, therefore, is the heart of progress, essentially. And that progress depends on this connectivity. So I've got a sort of series of I think, reasonably uncontroversial statements. So progress depends on innovation. So innovation is just something new and progress is also new. The innovation clearly depends on new ideas. And new ideas tend to occur at the conjunction of thoughts not previously combined. And these, therefore, depend on better communications. And so all progress then depends on better communications. So I was rather pleased when David, in his introduction there, was talking about the importance of networking amongst academic scholars, because it is all about making connections. And as David says, talking to people, seeing who's working on similar things, doing perhaps a similar methodological approach, or perhaps just has ideas that are of interest to you. And that only really works if you're prepared to go out of your way, out of your comfort zone, and meet people who challenge your ideas. And so to some extent I'm slightly anxious at the moment that universities are beginning to perhaps overprotect students from being exposed to ideas that they find controversial or challenging. Because we have to be robust enough to argue against these things if we disagree with them. And we have to be, therefore, prepared to have arguments, because that's how progress is made, when ideas are thrashed out and new ideas come through that kind of clashing of previously unconnected ideas. So if we look through history, I've got two kind of history slides. What we think about as communications these days, of course, is the internet, particularly the internet. But if we go back sort of 300 years or so, the fastest any idea or any goods or products could be moved around the world is probably about 10 miles an hour. And there are still countries in the world, as we know, that's a lot of shifting of ideas or shifting of produce is going at this kind of speed. And that's not all that long ago. So it was only once we had things like the steam engines, which went into trains or into ships, that we could actually start moving things around more quickly. In those times then, the conjunctions of activities, so this could be, for example, a town where there was a good river crossing, where ideas are coming with people that need to cross that river to get their goods to markets across the other side. And in the inns and the meeting places, That's where ideas are being exchanged. Then, of course, it becomes ports and harbours, again, where there's lots of innovation, lots of ideas being exchanged. So not only goods being transferred, but also ideas. If we then move to the 20th century, we've got aircraft coming on, which obviously mean that people, and therefore their ideas, and some goods can be transferred that much more quickly. And then finally, by the end of the 20th century, we've got the internet, and we get almost instantaneous connections around the world, providing obviously you have the internet, and some goods now, a large percentage of trade these days is digital rather than actual physical goods that have to go on aircraft. So it's not just ideas, but it's goods and services that can be transferred around the world instantaneously. And around each of those platform, if you like, innovations, we have clusters of new ideas about how to live your life, new ideas about society, new ideas about the way things are done. And so we can see that innovation clusters around these kind of platform changes in technology. Now, I want to go a little bit further back. I was in Singapore earlier this year, and I went to the Asian Civilizations Museum. I don't know whether any of you have actually been, but I would definitely recommend that you go to the Asian Civilization Museum in Singapore. In there, as you walk in, there is a boat that looks like the picture there, although that's a modern version of one. There is hundreds and hundreds of plates. That's what these are. They look as though they're made of gold, but they're actually just painted yellow, and they're plates, various sorts, and jars, and the most beautiful gold cups and things like that. And this was found a shipwreck southeast of Singapore, here on the map, and it was wrecked in the 9th century, so about 820. In that shipwreck were all these goods that were handcrafted but produced en masse in China and shipped down the Chinese coast, the intention being up past India, across and into the Middle East. Beautiful objects, luxury objects, spices, commodities like rice, foodstuffs. This boat is tiny, it would fit in this room. And that's the sort of thing that they were transporting around. The boat was tied together with coconut fibre. It wasn't nailed together. The most amazing shipping going around. And of course, ideas were going along. So what was happening was that some of these things have colours and symbols that were attracted to people in the Middle East. So they were clearly made to order. It wasn't a speculative trip. So when we think of international trade, international business, and the exchange of ideas as being something that's relatively recent, what we can see here in just these small pictures of shipping going around in the 9th century, what we can see is 3 clear geographic regions. So we've got Asia and Africa, the Middle East. From the Middle East, it's only a short land hop until you're then into Europe. And we're talking about 11 centuries ago, very, very long time ago. So these ideas are going, and ideas are being transferred even at these sorts of times. So I bring us right up to date then. This is the most recent data that I could get from various sorts. Going back to this idea of scale. So clearly, in the 9th century, those businessmen that were using these boats tied together with coconut fibre would probably have thought that they could be more successful if they had a bigger boat. And countries have tended, and China still clearly does, really want to be bigger. It's got ambitions. It's currently taking over very slowly Hong Kong. It's quite ambitious to take over Taiwan. It feels that size is very important. But if we have a look at the top trading nations these days, these are the busiest trading nations. So Hong Kong, Luxembourg, Singapore, and Ireland and Switzerland trade over practically over as far as Switzerland is concerned, 100% of all that's produced in. So clearly what's happening with somewhere like Hong Kong is that they're taking stuff in from, say, China, and then it's being shipped out of Hong Kong. So more than their GDP, twice as much of GDP is actually being shipped out of Hong Kong. Even more in Luxembourg, Singapore slightly less, Switzerland just under 100%. So stuff is being shipped out from these countries, either digital trade and services or actual physical trade and services, which is particularly Hong Kong and Singapore. These things are being shipped out. And these are tiny places. So if we have a look at the populations, the biggest is Switzerland with 8.5 million people. And that's the 99th biggest country in the world. So it's a small place. If we have a look at how rich they are, however, we see that these are very rich countries. So, for example, if we have a look at Luxembourg, gross domestic product per person on purchasing power parity rates for Luxembourg makes it the second richest, this is after Qatar, at something like £83,000 per annum per person. Okay? And the least wealthy is Hong Kong, which is the 12th richest nation in the world. So what we have is the smallest nations are not necessarily the richest nations, but they are very well connected because the ideas are going through them as well as the goods and services. And it's actually very difficult to get measures of how innovative, there are measures of innovativeness of countries, but they tend to look at the enabling factors rather than proof that that enables something. So I haven't actually got that, but these are countries who are very innovative as well. Okay, if we have a look at the firm size, however, what we can see is that the biggest firms, Walmart, usually at the top of the list, lots of Chinese companies now coming through, some of the car companies, petroleum, state-controlled, frequently energy companies as well. We look at those, they tend to come from the big companies. So the big companies produce the richest, the largest companies. These are ranked, however, in terms of revenues, annual revenues. So Walmart is, and has been for a very long time, right at the top, biggest company from the wealthiest overall and largest country in the United States. Not small countries involved there, apart from the Netherlands, which of course again is a major trading post, a major harbour, port city. Okay, so the rich and the populous countries definitely have these big businesses. So the United States, China, Japan, very populous countries, pretty rich countries, but not the very richest necessarily. And also, these aren't necessarily the most efficient. So they may be huge companies, but they're not necessarily the most profitable per person employed or per resources used. Okay, another concept there. What has also happened historically is that countries have tended to want to get bigger. So in the 19th century there was lots of unification of countries or of empires. The ones I picked up on here, Germany was unified in the 1870s, similarly Italy after a kind of prolonged period of unification. America finally unified beginning of the 19th century, Civil War mid-19th century, sorted out by the 1870s. So we've got lots of countries getting bigger. And in the 20th century that has continued with the North American Free Trade Area, the EU as it now is, ASEAN and these other big trading blocs. So the idea that actually units should get bigger. And that ties in with the idea that businesses should get bigger because of things like economies of scale and scope and the need to compete on the basis predominantly of price. But what we've got here in the 21st century, I like this picture of Trump closing the door on Mexico and Canada. But it's a very slimline trump, really, isn't it? It's perhaps it's flattering, shall we say. So what we know is that Trump is thinking maybe the North American free trade area isn't such a good thing. And they're trying to perhaps build a wall to keep the Mexicans out. And the Canadians are apparently considering building a wall to keep the Americans out because all the Americans want to move to Canada. But also, Trump has alienated the Canadians through controversy over the Bombardier deal, for example. And similarly, of course, we've got the other controversial issue, which is affecting the United Kingdom and the exit in a couple of years' time, well, a year and a bit's time now, from the European Union. And then we've got issues such as Catalonia in Spain, that doesn't want to be part of the Spanish nation state either. So, is it possible then that now we are in the 21st century, nation states are breaking up? And is that linked to the idea that perhaps we don't need companies to be as big? We're not just competing on scale and price around the world as much. But is that also linked to the connections and the internet? A couple of core theories here. This is old stuff. I'm sure you've probably all heard of Michael Porter. Writing his best stuff probably in the 1980s. Two key things that I think are really important. The first is that he argued as early as the 1980s that the macroeconomic explanations of international trade no longer actually explain the success of individual trading nations. And that really what we needed to focus on was the microeconomic things. So yes, of course, factor conditions, how wealthy a country is. So Qatar, for example, Saudi Arabia, they've got oil, they're very wealthy countries. So those resources are very important. China, America, huge population, wealthy population in America, increasingly wealthy population in China. Demand conditions are obviously there. But also, it's how business is done in those countries, how open they are to trade, how well organised the legal system is, the financial system. All of those kind of things are providing the framework for countries to do business. And secondly, the related and supporting industries. The second Porter contribution that I think is important in this is the very famous value chain. Now, this is loved by people that teach business and strategy because it's so obvious, really. Top right there is the traditional value chain. And I've picked out some key quotes because I think sometimes in just applying the value chain, which is standard undergrad stuff, we miss on some of the key points that Michael Porter makes here. The first is, competitive advantage cannot be understood by looking at a firm as a whole. It stems from the many discrete activities a firm performs in designing, producing, marketing, delivering, and supporting its product. So it's the connections and it's the activities that are very important. The second thing is that the value chain is embedded in a larger stream of activities or value system. So this is supply chains, for example, but also can be the institutional environment, the government, the legal system, the banks, whatever. And that was developed really by McKinsey into these kind of linking value chain ideas. All fine, all late 20th century strategic management. Final thing is that gaining and sustaining competitive advantage depends on understanding not only the firm's value chain, but how the firm fits into the overall value system. Now, I argue that has changed very significantly with the internet, with the democratization of information, with the rise of digital trade, with more use of big data. And I think this is what has happened. The value chain is hollowing out for businesses. What's happening is that managers are salami slicing their business activities such that there are holes in the value chain. And those holes are being filled by smaller businesses that are highly focused on particular activities. Now this is just a very stylized thing, so it could be in the car industry. We know that Henry Ford in the 1920s, they had rubber plantations, steel mills, made all the components, made the cars right the way through to retailers. They had garage forecourts. They controlled and owned the whole of the value chain, the supply chain, from raw materials, primary producers, right the way through to retailing. If you look at the car industry these days, they don't actually do an awful lot at all. They do the design, and they do the assembly maybe, they do a bit of marketing, they make most of their money from finance rather than actually selling cars. And everything else is subcontracted to smaller businesses, either in the home country or internationally. But also call centres, IT, financial advice, catering, all of these things are being subcontracted. So what we have is this kind of hollowing out of organisations. And so therefore, to conclude, what I'm going to argue is that as the world has shrunk effectively because of this ease of communication, so we no longer can only send ideas and send goods and services at maybe 10 miles an hour. Now we can send them, many of them anyway, instantaneously. The dominant nations wanted to grow. So it was all about getting bigger, and businesses also wanted to grow. It was all about size. So if we look at what are the most successful companies in terms of their profitability and in terms of the countries in terms of their gross domestic product per capita, what we see is that it's frequently small nations, but nations that trade a lot, that are very, very successful. The most profitable, the richest countries aren't the biggest, necessarily, okay? And that even those very large and successful businesses, like Walmart, like the car companies, like some of the oil companies and so on, are hollowing out. So their value chain has got gaps in it now. And that is leaving the opportunities for those smaller, fleet of foot, nimble organisations from many different parts of the world. So there are opportunities, the obvious one being things like call centres, right the way through to IT support that is offshored from Europe and America to India. Huge opportunities for people. They don't have now to move to look for work. The work is in the home country, the expertise is already there, the skills are already there. So, all of these innovations then, and changes in structure, have probably been enabled by the internet, the World Wide Web. So, I leave you with the question then, is it possible that in the 21st century we might see smaller political, i.e. nation states, as well as economic units prevailing? I'll leave you with that. Thank you very much.
Now, I think any direct questions to Professor Lynn, let's have now, but then it would be nice to have all three speakers on for a platform at the end of the session. So, shall we move on to the second presentation, which is Peter, I think, yes?
Sure.
Please. Thank you very much, Lynn.
Right. Just take me a few seconds to change over machines here. While I do that, I'll just give you a little bit of my background. I was born into a mining community in the UK, in the Midlands. The education system was entirely tilted towards providing people who would go down a coal mine and hew coal. So virtually no education at all. I went down and had a look. To give you an idea, I look at nations in terms of time frame. My grandfather went down a coal mine to join his mother in the UK. So if you look at a lot of developing nations, they are as the UK used to be. And it's a sort of very interesting transition. So what, I'm not going to bore you with the details of my education, but let's say that it was hard won. And so I finished up in the biggest company I worked in as the CTO, that was British Telecom. I left and formed my own consultancy. The biggest thing I invested in and created was eBookers, which became the biggest travel agent in Europe. The simplest investment I made as an entrepreneur was Shazam Entertainment. I gave them some money and they went away. And that has become a £1 billion company, but it's taken 17 years. I have started over 30 companies. The vast majority failed. And the failure has always been the people. It's always the people, all right? So right now I'm here as a member of a one-year-old university, the University of Suffolk. My life consists of flying a lot and working for various companies. So I'm working for Facebook. I work for the Qatari government and a lot more. And so I build stuff and I solve problems, and generally it's fun but difficult. All right. So here's a point in question of sort of reference. You're not going to do anything without breaking a few eggs. You just can't expect things to happen. You need revolutionary people who go out there, ask the difficult questions and do the difficult stuff. So this is the big problem. This is where we came from. It was a slow-moving, connected-ish world where things ambled along at a steady state and things were on a human scale. And we could understand this stuff because it was largely linear. You put in A into the system and B came out. Always. It was dead simple. The theory of economics started with those sort of simple assumptions. And since then, economic theory has just fallen apart. And there is not a single economic theory that works in the general case. And the reason is this. The world has now become not only dynamic and more connected, it's absolutely non-linear. And let me explain non-linear. You put in A in the system today, and you get B out. Tomorrow, you put A into the system, and you get Z out. You have no idea what the relationship is between the in and the out of the overall system. And the snag is, we have no mathematics to tackle that problem. We're flying blind in the classical sense. And so, not surprising, companies, people, organizations, nations get surprises. So this chart sort of gives a view of why we're having difficulty. On the top line there, we've gone from that simple, everything is understandable Newtonian world to a quantum mechanical world, which is really complicated, and I think we can safely say no one really understands quantum mechanics. But worst of all now, we're getting into quantum dynamics. This is getting way, way, way beyond human ability. So we're going from linear thinking to nonlinear thinking to nonlinear discovery, simplicity in order to complexity. There are absolutely no simple solutions to complex problems, period. Okay, so when some dumb politician says they're going to build a wall and that will solve the problem, you think, well, haven't you ever heard of tunnels, parachutes, gliders, boats? I mean, it's just a ridiculous sort of statement. So here's something that hit me 25 years ago. I was creating R&D teams. We were tackling all kinds of things. I had 45 people working on artificial intelligence 25, 30 years ago. Artificial life, I had another 45 people working on it. And then I had an econometrics group who were modelling the company and those kinds of things. And I had every race, colour, creed, discipline. I even recruited a theologian onto my research team because I worried about what technologies do. I am one. We launch stuff into society and then stand back when things go badly wrong. And I wanted to put in some forethought. And I concluded that I needed a different kind of brain, and that brain is now here, and it's called AI. And when people say, artificial intelligence systems play chess, but they don't play chess like us, thank God. That's exactly the point. We need different ways of thinking, and it's on a scale that is just now beyond our ability. So I'm going to give you some examples of technology we can't do. This is in your pocket right now. People can't make these. We've not been able to make these for 30 years. I used to design these. I used to be a circuit designer and a chip designer. The AI now designs the chips. The robots now build the chips. They're in your pocket. I've just left my phone in my jacket pocket. I've got an iPhone. It is more powerful than the Cray 2 supercomputer. So this is on a scale you can't even see. If this goes wrong, we have to assume things are going to go wrong, and we program around physical manifestations of breakages and things like that. So this is what I had a team of ladies doing. They were putting the wires onto the chips to the outside packaging at about this speed. And they were doing this is all they did all day. And you can see it's quite an intricate movement. And here comes the robot doing exactly the same thing. This year, 2 billion smart mobile phones will be shipped. 2 billion. This is the first time in the history of our species we've been able to make massive computing engines that go in your pocket, and we're going to ship 2 billion. There are now far more mobile phones on the planet than there are people. Everybody can get access to one. These are real game changers. So here is Silicon Valley. Anybody been to Silicon Valley? I've spent half my life there. This is an incredible place, and it's a bit big, and the point is, there is not another Silicon Valley on the entire planet, and there never will be. It took over 100 years to build Silicon Valley, and you can't build an ecology top down. You can only build ecologies bottom up. So I have a hypothesis here. No country, no matter how big on the planet today, has got sufficient mineral wealth, materials wealth, people wealth, education, manufacturing facilities, anything. No country can stand alone. The reason it's all got split up is it's gone to where the resources are. So if we want to do something like this, don't start building, start networking. Today, there are 750,000 vacancies for high-tech people. 200,000 of those vacancies are for people who do data analysis. But we're going to stop immigration. Brilliant. So how are we going to do it? We're going to have to network that work out and in. We're going to have to virtualize it, and we have no choice. So here is the king of simple. This guy has got 3 PhDs in dumbness. It's just quite extraordinary how this has happened. If I go to the east, if I go to India and I go to the east, people celebrate, almost worship intelligence, education, knowledge, and capability. I go to the United States and Europe, and you are a target of ridicule. And sometimes I remind these people their ignorance is nowhere near as powerful as my capability and understanding, but it doesn't matter. And we have government ministers making comments like, we're tired of experts. Okay. So here's something that hit me in the eye very recently that I thought was quite funny. Traditionally, companies look like this. The age scale goes up. All the guys at the top, young guys at the bottom. It used to be that these guys would talk to these guys to get advice and knowledge and share. And there's been an interesting change. It's like that. So I'm pleased to say, for the first time in a long time, I'm not the oldest guy in the room. But I am 19.
I'm very depressed at this, you know.
So this is, I'm way down here. My boss is 25 years younger than I am. His boss is 15 years younger than, and then his boss is 10 years younger. So the whole thing is upside down. But what has happened is, all the knowledge and wisdom is down here. Right at the top, these guys are like delta functions. They know a huge amount about almost nothing. And they're infallible because they had an idea, they went out and created the company and it worked. Here's the snack. There isn't a Google success. There are 999 Google failures and one of them succeeded. They were lucky. Facebook is the same. There are hundreds of Facebooks being created. One of them won. The business analysts say these guys are geniuses. No, they're not. They were lucky. Okay, and if I could have anything, I would have more luck. So you know, this is the reality. The only human being that likes change is a crying baby. We all balk at it, and we're struggling because the speed of change now is on an inhuman scale. It's really, really difficult. So my wife was with me this morning, Jane. We have rather a lot of children and grandchildren, and our mission in life is always to be ahead of our kids with the technology. We take great pride and joy in having technology when they come to visit that they don't have. And it's kind of, so we talk to our house, we talk to our car, we talk to everything. Our children don't, and they're somewhat horrified. So if you don't know this guy, it's worth at least looking up on Wikipedia. He's sometimes portrayed as some kind of devil. He was a phenomenal statesman. He understood culture and human beings and the motivations and all that. And these are should be in Holy Writ. As soon as you come up with a new idea, it's difficult. So last night, I was at a dinner in my home with a lot of people, ostensibly to have fun, but the hidden agenda was, I'm trying to do something, and I'm massaging them gently, one at a time, throughout the organisation, so that when I say I want to do something, everybody agrees. I don't want to debate. And it takes a while to politic things to get people lined up. So, look, by the way, you're going to get this slide set. I'm going to give it to you. And so, luck is everything. But you need people, a good team, you need a good network. And I can't emphasise that enough. So this was my life. Most innovation is absolutely one foot in step to the other, incremental. The iPhone is nothing original. When I worked for Motorola, they had an iPhone 4 years before Apple. Nokia had one 3 years before Apple. The user group in Nokia said, what would we need a big screen for? And we don't like, well, you know, where's the keys? We want some proper keys. So they didn't do it. Motorola had a board of people who don't diddly squat, and they said, why would anybody want a camera on a phone? It's a stupid idea. And so those are the sorts of things that really happen. So it's by far the dominant mode. So look at the Steve Jobs, hit on an idea, was a music player, popped a phone in it, and it took off, and it carries on today. And so this is one of my favourite scenes. This is the mighty company of Xerox, and it was about the time when Steve and the gang were to raid Xerox to get all the technology and the good ideas. So here we go.
Let me ask you about the iPhone and the Zune, if I may. The Zune was getting some traction, and Steve Jobs goes to Macworld and he pulls out this iPhone. What was your first reaction when you saw that? $500?
fully subsidized with a plan? I said, that is the most expensive phone in the world, and it doesn't appeal to business customers because it doesn't have a keyboard, which makes it not a very good email machine. Now, it may sell very well or not. We have our strategy. We've got great Windows mobile devices in the market today.
So this is Steve Ballmer. He was number 2 in Microsoft. He got it badly wrong. So this is an interesting cycle because making a giant leap from a naked flame to a light bulb was a lot of invention, a huge amount of risk, and all kinds of technical and financial and technology fights there. So Edison was one guy in Europe, and in the US, his name's dropped out of my mind. I've been to his museum. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That was the problem. They had to do a lot of research to get there. But here, a little bit, and here, some more. So the basic idea is in place, and it starts to get a bit easier. People want now, but people were afraid of this. They knew what that was, and people were afraid of that. And so people would put a plug in, and if they took it out, they'd sweep up the electricity right in the bin and put the plug back. It was that kind of superstition that came with it. So you get the risk of getting to market and going like that, and you get the rewards go up, profit margins. So this is actually now a reenactment of the day when Steve and the gang went to Xerox. I worked inside Xerox Park a bit. It was a wonderful place. There was a Xerox Park office in Cambridge, which was a hive of interesting innovation. So Steve went in, got everything, and it's a hoot.
This is who we wanted to steal from. Xerox. They were secretly developing all this amazing stuff like the mouse and the graphics on the screen instead of just a bunch of numbers. But when those California engineers had to go to New York and present all this neat stuff to the Xerox brass, those executives didn't begin to understand what they were looking at. Never mind a mouse. It was like someone dumped a dead rat on the boardroom table. A mouse. You want Xerox to consider something called a mouse? See, this is where Steve was a genius, because he persuaded Xerox's head office into showing us all this incredible stuff that California guys had developed. I'm telling you, it was making their people absolutely nuts. You know, I felt like one of the Mongol hordes coming to loot and plunder a bunch of defenseless villagers.
This is insane. We just be handing him everything, and we created the mouse and all the rest of it, and now these idiots in New York want to show it off to Steve Jobs. I won't do it.
Hi, I'm Steve Jobs.
I need you to answer some other questions about the stuff you've invented, the graphic interface.
That was it. That's where the Windows environment came
That's
from.
what you think.
By the way, there's something very interesting.
What do you want to...
Microsoft were one of the biggest investors in Apple. And I always thought of Apple as being Microsoft's research lab. And then it all went badly wrong. So here's reality. You know, very often people have an idea. Any idea is worth absolutely zip. It's not worth a dime. You can have 1,000 ideas a day. You do the research, you do the development, you even create a demo model, and it's worth a bit. Not much. All the expenditure, all the effort, the tears, the pain comes in getting that demo model into a production item and getting it to market. That is the killer thing you have to do. And then you have to try and get income to recover your costs before your funding runs out. And it is a living nightmare but almost exactly like opium. Once you've done it, you want to do it again, even if you fail. It's really very addictive. And what you hope is it's going to do that. So in the case of e-bookers, that idea came out of my brain. I designed a lot of the system. It took off, and it was growing at 35% per month. And we couldn't keep up, and I was responsible for all the monies. And so I say, every month at the board meeting, how much money we spent? Don't know. How much money have we taken in? Don't know. How much money we got in the bank? Don't know. Or somebody find out, because we're responsible here, guys. And it went like that for nearly 4 years. Totally out of control, and I don't know why. But it was the right idea, the right time, and it just worked. If you want to appear the dumbest person next to the president on the planet, go into a business meeting and say these words. There's no proven business case, there's no proven market, there's no investment case, there's been no risk assessment. There was no proven market for a bicycle, a telephone, a wristwatch, or anything else. There never is a proven market, unless it's something that's just evolutionary. So people have tried their best to codify innovation, and there's lots and lots of models and lots of tools. And this one's been modified by me, but this came out of DARPA in the US, and it's what you try and do. I have never in my life been able to tick all the boxes on that. The only time that you can do this is when you're building an aircraft or a car and all the components are already in existence. If you're building bridges, and we know everything about concrete, you're okay. But if you're trying to modify the genome, this doesn't work. So it's interesting, because people like to throw this lot at you, and in actual fact, the more towards the leading edge you go, the more and more relevant this lot gets. And this is the difference between the old way of doing war, with everybody stood in a line with fixed bayonets and rifles, marching to the beat of the drum, and guerrilla warfare. And leading edge innovation is exactly like guerrilla warfare. So there's another myth as well. You have managers and you have leaders. I have never ever in my life been a manager without having to be a leader. You know, management is about being someone that your people can come to and you orchestrate, but you find that you have to put energy in and be a champion and an arbiter and a reassurer. And this is the management radar. You're looking into a fog. So I'll give you an example. When I came into industry as an engineer, the project cycle was as long as 10 years for a product. Okay, and I would have, as a consultant when I started my company, we have an order book that was 2 or 3 years out. We're now working about 6 weeks, 12 weeks ahead. And the company keeps going, and my model is a farmer on a combined harvester cutting the corn in a fog. I don't know if the corn stops, there is a cliff, a ditch, or a wall, because I can't see. And all you can do is keep running. So that is the reality. So when you do get a project nailed, this is what happens. First of all, the customer never knows what they want. They'll say what they want, but they don't. And you have to try and cajole them. And the thing that they do is when they see what you've built, is they add a few more bells and whistles, and you get this mission creep comes in, and the costs start to escalate. You know, you just built an aircraft, it's exactly what they wanted, but now they decide they really want a rocket. And making that transition is very hard. And they will change deadlines. And so, at the same time, there's competition out there that will wipe you out with a better product. And I always say to people, don't look for the competition in your own sector. Look over your shoulder. It's the competition from out of sector that comes as the biggest surprise and is the biggest danger. So I would say look for appropriateness. Yes, you need a massive management system for digging a channel tunnel or building these things. But if you're going to buy a pencil, you just need a credit card. And if you start a company, you need a big credit card. The other thing is situation awareness. You need the network from heaven. Get onto every business network, every social network, and you need to look, watch, and make sure that you're on top of what is happening. The biggest failing of all is people's inability to communicate clearly. Doesn't matter what you do, you can write it down, you can put it on a slide set, you can tell people what you want, and say, all I want you to do is paint that wall white. And you come back and they're building a brick wall. So, you know, what did you get? It's almost as bad as that. So here's the complexity. This is actually a real project. This is non-linear. It's just so complex we can't get our brain around. So I'm going to give you, as I tail off here, some real experiences. As a young engineer in 1980, I just got my PhD in 79. I started work on Tat 8, and here was the mission statement: connect New York to London with optical fibre. What a project, brilliant. It was a snag. We had no lasers, no pins, no saws, no chips, no cable, no housing, and no fibre. Apart from that, we're in great shape. 6 years later, that went in, was in the water. It was the first connection of the modern internet, and it was a great success. I had over 2,500 people working on it, but I started off designing the chips because I was the only guy at that time in the lab at Dimension Digital. We built our own chips, we co-opted Fujitsu in, and we worked with them to get the lasers. We made our own pins, we did our own packaging, we built the whole thing, and we got STMC to glue the thing together, and at that time we had no proven business case. By the way, the capacity was laughable. It was 560 megabits per second, half a gigabit each way. Can you imagine that? So this is the stuff, the actual stuff. This is repeater housing for fibre and a cable. And so all that was developed in less than 6 years, and it led to a revolution. Almost no telecommunication traffic goes on satellite, by the way. People think that when they pick up their mobile phone it goes on satellite. No, nothing does. It's all terrestrial radio and optical fibre everywhere. You get some islands and some parts in the middle of large countries where you have to use satellite. Extremely rare. So what it became is a mega industry with cables being laid all over the world. So I'm going to tell you one apocryphal story about a big organisation. I inherited the whole program, found that nothing was moving, and the big problem was there was nowhere to do the test and measure of the components that we were manufacturing. So I went to the estates department and said, I need some floor space, and they said, well, we'll consider your request, Dr. Cochrane, in 6 weeks' time. I said, I'll be in court in 6 weeks' time for no delivery. I mean, tomorrow I need some. I know you've got some space, just give me some space. You don't have to do anything, just give me some space. They wouldn't. So I was on a knife edge. What do I do? And what I did was, I pulled out my American Express card, and I purchased 6 porta cabins. I commandeered a parking lot, took it over, put 6 porta cabins smack in the middle of the site. We ran hose pipes for water, electrical cables out of all the buildings, opened the drains, poured all the slush down into the drains. The porta cabins arrived at 6 o'clock in the morning because there was nobody else on site. By 10 o'clock they were all linked together. By lunchtime we got all the services in, and that afternoon work started, and the next day the production line started to flow through. A delegation came from estates with their clipboards and said, we're going to the chairman to tell the chairman that I asked it's outrageous. So please do. Here's my business card. And at that time I knew the chairman quite well. I said, while you were there, please explain while you were prepared to crash this multi-billion-dollar project and bring the company into disrepute. To use an Americanism, I knew that these guys had not got the kahunas to go and do that. And so it turned out to be a big success. Sometimes you have to do outrageous stuff. I gave a presentation after in Marbella, that's the Association of British Travel Agents. The audience was outraged because on stage I walked through how bad the modern travel experience was and how useless travel agents was, because they can get from A to B, but they can't do complicated trips. And I was doing 22 trips a year to the US, and I was going to Japan and Australia and England. I was all over the place. And a gentleman walked out who had a 25 million travel agent shop business in London, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Peter, I need to work with you." Within the month, we'd had one meeting at Heathrow, one at Gatwick. He'd raised 55 million, and we got rolling. And it was both a delight and a nightmare at the same time. But it was a tremendous experience. Concept Labs, Steve Jobs kicked out his advanced technology group because they were doing research. Get rid of those, don't need those. Like most big companies now, they farm the world for ideas and innovation, bring it in, exploit it, and people are now queuing it up to get inside Apple. Anyway, I took these guys out of Apple. We got some money, we got a building in Silicon Valley, and we did something that was absolutely needed. There were lots of people with ideas, with no clue how to design a project, actually get the product to the market, raise funding and marketing and all that. And I put all these people together who could do all of that. And this was in 1998, just before dot-com bust. It was perfect timing. As soon as the dot-com bust had arrived, our backers found that they could get 0.25% somewhere else. They pulled all the money out and ran. And we ran it effectively with our own money for another 3 years before it crashed. So this one, I've done all kinds of things. It's all innovative and fun, and I'll talk about that with you at some point if you wish. And I'm going to, questions. This is at a point where we can have a couple of minutes discussion before we get to the end. And thinking different is the key. Being bold is another. Making the right decision for your company rather than the right decision for your career. What's killing Western industries? The people are working and marching to the tune of KPIs, key performance indicators. You achieve this objective, you will get a big fat check. They come in 3-4 years, do the job, walk out and kill the company. The other thing that they do, and the accountants should be strung up from this, optimize. I'm going around the world telling companies to stop optimizing. Good example, Hewlett-Packard. Hewlett-Packard were the world leader in time standards, medical instrumentation, industrial instrumentation, telecommunication, test equipment. They were a magic company. I didn't know, but I met Hewlett and Packard. They were sergeants out of the American Army, and their key strap line is, we are going to provide value to our customers. Brilliant. They were phased out, and the optimization started. This unit making chips is not profitable enough, close it down. And gradually, one day, it got to the point where I was called by the CEO, and he said, "Peter, what's wrong with this company?" I said, "Well, it's very sad, but you've only got one product. It's a printer, and all you do is sell paper and ink. And by the way, you don't design and make any of that. You killed all the innovation, and now HP is a basket case. Motorola, the same story. And it's not the time of the hand of death or anything, it's just that I get called in as the Grim Reaper is there. And it's just really quite upsetting to see these organisations destroyed by people who have been educated in management and think they know how to manage with no idea whatsoever about the technology industry, the customers or anything else. So, I'm going to suggest to you that you do a few things. I'm just going to run this video as I phase out. I'm going to give you all a business card. I'm going to suggest you link with me. I have a social network that goes about 30 million deep. And you don't have to do anything, but you will see interesting stuff come on your screen. So I get engaged in medical programs, military programs, education, all kinds of stuff. I read all the time. And my biggest problem is being absolutely overwhelmed by information. We can help each other with this. It's an information network. You can also go to my homepage and you will find a lot of slide sets. And as my research professor said, Mr. Cochrane, if you go and steal one man's results, that is plagiarism. If you steal 10 men's results, that's research. So I'm going to suggest you get out there, do some research. The thing about this is, this guy has trained all his life to be this good. This robot has had 1 hour's training. In a nutshell, that's what robotics and AI is about. Is this technology going to put everybody out of work? No. Elon Musk is wrong. I know Elon Musk. And Stephen Hawking is wrong. And I know Stephen Hawking. Neither of them ever designed or used an AI system in their life. And they're doing what everybody does with new technology comes. They panic. Right now, we're desperately short of human beings on this planet. AI is going to be the biggest toolkit we were ever given. It's going to empower us. The robots will do stuff that we can't do, or that we can do, but they will do it better, and it will allow us to move on. In the UK, you cannot find unskilled people, skilled people. Okay, you try and find somebody who will do painting, decorating, electrical work, plumbing, building. You can't find people. Find somebody to staff up your hotel and your coffee shop. You can't. But let's send all the immigrants home. It will close down businesses everywhere. There's lots of jobs, huge demand across all the Western nations, and the policies that we're seeing enacted are just barbaric and phenomenally stupid, and we have to do something about it. Just one final comment. It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution was over that the Europeans discovered how to do chromium plating. The Chinese were using chromium plating for their weapons 2,000 years before, and we don't know quite how they did it. So never dismiss any nation, any group of people and say they're not creative and they're not inventive. Rubbish. Absolutely magic. So let me just put that up. This is where you'll get all my written papers, of which there are over 1,000 now, and a lot of them are very short, easy to read. And then I think there's something just over 70 slide sets, all kinds of topics you can download. Just drag them down and use them. My philosophy of life is very, very simple. I give absolutely everything away. Unless you contract me, in which you'll have to pay. But for education especially, we should give everything to our children. And the sad thing is I'm not going to be able to be with you for the full conference because I've got to get to Singapore for next week. But while I'm here, I will give you any amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we'll move straight on to Professor Nasrul, and then after that we will have questions and discussion. Thank you, Peter.
Have you got a laptop there, sir? You do. Please. Would you like some water? You're okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me to be here to talk about something with research, with technology, what I'm doing at the moment. And thanks for my previous speakers, Professor Lin from Plymouth, Peter. They talked about several things. One of the key words I learned that they're talking about communication, connect. Yeah, that is the key thing to work networks. Okay, so that is again follow up in my presentation. What I will talk about the collaboration. Okay, so that's we're talking about collaborative innovation in high-tech industry. So my previous research focused mostly on high-tech industry, for example, micro nano manufacturing technologies, nanotechnologies, that kind of stuff. Because I did my PhD on nanotechnology systems of innovation and then work on several kind of research surrounding this industry. Currently, I'm working with Exeter University Business School as an innovation and entrepreneurship group. Before that, I worked with Dundee and Cardiff. So let's go on to focus on, because time is limited, because it's 30 minutes. So right, if we talk about innovation, then we must talk about creative destruction, okay? And that was formulated by Professor Schumpeter in 1932, and Joseph Schumpeter, okay, in Austria, Austrian economist. So he first used the term called creative destruction that is directly related to the innovation. So what is innovation is about, okay? The three key things here, he was saying that the old ways of doing things are destructed and replaced by new ways of doing things, okay? And that is the key message of innovation. So old was it can be product, it can be process, it can be business, anything, okay? So whatever we are doing, existing old ways of doing things, you have to destruct it by new ways. And how is it possible? How can you destruct the old ways of doing a product or process or whatever else, okay? That is coming the third line, but before that I want to say, any innovation leads to a stationary state or equilibrium. So have you heard an equilibrium? So there is a term called in science and engineering term, okay? Equilibrium, both is reversible. So any innovation, whatever is new ideas, new product, process, or whatever else, okay? At a certain time, innovation leads to a stationary state, equilibrium. So you have to break down that equilibrium. Otherwise, no economic development. And who do that? That is an entrepreneur. Okay? An entrepreneur disrupts that equilibrium or this equilibrium, and that is the prime cause of economic development. So we have the term called innovation, okay? And sometimes innovation leads in a stationary state equilibrium. So for an economic development, for cycle for going forward, so we need an entrepreneur who disrupts that equilibrium, okay? Who make chaos of the stationary phase or the stationary system. So that is the idea of creative destruction, okay? So next, that the theories come up in innovation management field. It's a science and technology push. And okay, so what does it mean? Science and technology, investing in knowledge production would generate innovation. So Joseph Schumpeter talks about innovation. We need entrepreneur to disrupt that equilibrium. And the later the theories comes is only if we invest science and engineering and technology, and that creates a production of innovation or scientific innovation. Okay. The another theory come up later, market pull. Okay, that changes in demand-derived innovation is not like science and technology push, but also market. We have to look at what are the demand from the customers, consumers, and that drives innovation. Okay, the both sides, science and technology push and market pull, demand pull. And then later on, in 1990s, Professor Ben Lundvall and Christopher Freeman from his crew. Lundvall is working in Denmark, Aalborg University. I met him several times. And his crew, they're coming up with the concept. Richard Nelson from Columbia University. They come up with concept systems of innovation. Okay? The whole systems of innovation is he was talking about the systems of innovation is not something the single way to do things. That means you have to have actors, and the actors will collaborate or connect with each other. Okay, it's kind of the function of actors and how it processes. What are the connectivism? What are the connections? Okay, so to a smooth running and innovation systems. Okay, so there are different kind of systems. For example, national systems of innovation is called regional systems of innovation. Is called sectoral systems of innovation. Is called function of innovation system. Is called technological systems of innovation. Different categories, different place and different role. So again, at the last, now this is working. After that, there is no such theory. The systems of innovation, we found that we need actors who are playing a big role for innovation, and that actors must be connecting with each other to properly to smooth functioning that innovation. So now we have, at the beginning we have linear model, okay, science and technology push or market pull. After that, now a coupling model or interactive model. Okay, and this is the systems of innovation. So right, so now within that theory or framework, I want to explain how can we analyze high-tech industry within that framework. Okay, systems of innovation. So my sample is nanotechnology. We talked about. Peter also mentioned that scanning tunneling microscope, STM, AFM, this kind of sophisticated instruments. And these instruments are the key drives to explore atomic scale, molecular scale technology. And that is called nanotechnology. As you see, iPhone 6 or 7, there's a nano SIM. Actually, this is exactly not nanotechnology. They are saying the nano SIM means smaller. Okay? But this is not exactly nanotechnology. Okay? Nanotechnology is something playing or manipulating matter at the atomic scale or molecular scale. That means you have to play by atoms, DNA, something like that level, okay? But nano SIM is something that is not that level. But anyway, they are just marketing, that's a micro SIM, nano SIM like that. But in the future, this technology comes up, nanotechnology comes up, and in every sector, okay? So what nanotechnology is saying that nanotechnology is an enabling technology, a set of technologies. It's not a specific technology, it's a set of technologies, okay? And that should be played within the 100 nanometers, 100,000 nanometers scale. It's also a science-based and demand-driven field. So we can connect again with science and technology push or market pull. It's not only science-based technology, not only science-based innovation, that we have instruments like AFM, scanning tunneling, STM, we can explore in a molecular scale, nano scale. Okay? Not only that, it is also coming up from marketing to how to solve societal problems. So we have some societal problems, how to solve this by using nanotechnology. For example, water purification. How can you get purified water? If you have something nanotechnology, still membrane, then we can purify water. Agricultural production, something like that, nanotechnology can be useful. This comes from societal driven innovation. It also says complex field, okay, owing to its dependency on various scientific disciplines. Okay. Research and engineering approaches and advanced instrumentation. Why it says it dependency on different scientific fields? Okay, as you said, beginning is not a specific technology; it's a set of technologies. That means we have to have all scientific disciplines or disciplines we have to work on. For example, chemistry, physics, biology, material science, engineering, all will have to play a role in developing or exploiting these technologies. Why? Because you are talking about atomic scale, molecular scale, there is no boundary there. And if you go to atom or molecule, there is no physics, there is no chemistry, there is no biology, because there is an atom. Is the unit, that is the smallest unit. Okay? And there is no boundary there. So that's why we need different expertise to work together to exploit this technology, to commercialize this technology. So that's why, if you see Cambridge Nanoscience Center here, Thomson Avenue, I came here 2007 when I was a PhD student, because I talked about the director of Cambridge Nanoscience Center, Professor Sir Mark Whelan. Okay? So now still I think he's there. So I interviewed him, and then I tried to understand how it works. What is the role of this institution within the University of Cambridge campus? Okay? So that is something a long time before. But what I'm saying, that we need people from different disciplines to play with these technologies. It's also saying the basis of long-term productivity and economic growth. It's not saying that short-term productivity, long-term productivity. Okay. So if you talk about the future technology, what is the future? What is the future? So now is the mature enough IT or something, internet technologies, okay? IT technologies is already mature. So what is next? So the next will be the nano technologies, and that is the ending. That is the atomic and molecular scale, and that you can play with either top-down or bottom-up methods, okay? So another thing is, while companies undertake in-house R&D, collaboration with multiple actors are important sources of innovation and knowledge. So as you know, most of the companies, they have their own R&D sections. Not only universities, also companies, large companies, they have. But the key things for playing this technology, you have to have collaboration with multiple actors. Okay? So you need to collaborate. It's not that you are isolating, you are just developing this technology by your own. It's not that. So if we talk about nanotechnology, then what are the key things? What are the materials? Okay? The key materials is nanomaterials. And what is the nanomaterials? There are varieties, hundreds of nanomaterials, if we talk about, okay? For example, nanoparticle, okay, nanocomposites material, nanofiber, nanorods, nanocrystal, nanowire. There are a lot of thousands, because this molecular scale is developing from bottom up, okay? And nanomaterials is one of the smartest material of this century. Okay, and it's a revolutionary discovery in advanced materials. For example, I can give you an example. Have you heard of carbon nanotubes? Anyone? Carbon nanotubes? No. Have you heard graphene? Graphene. Okay. Fullerene, graphene, carbon nanotube, nanocrystal. These are the smartest materials now. This for this century. Okay. And graphene, as you know, carbon. You know carbon. And graphene is the allotropes of carbon. It's just coming from graphite. The graphite, the structure, if you are chemistry chemist, then you know the structure of graphite is very vulnerable, but diamond is very strong because of the internal structure. Okay, the diamond is the strongest material. Graphite is the weak material. Okay, and graphene coming from graphite, and there is a layers, and they can cut the layer and make the graphene. And graphene is more I think is 50% lighter than aluminum. And if you have some small portion of graphene, for example, 0.3% of graphene, we can incorporate carbon fiber. That will be there now. You are using it in plane, aircraft, and then some motor vehicle, automotive, everywhere. So it will be massive. What we have to do? We have to produce mass production of this material. But now is going up. It's not because we have to have resources. We have to have equipments and then to productions, and then we can go mass production. And that will be revolutionary in the future. So that's why it's a higher R&D investment. So if you want to invest higher money in that nanotechnology, that will cost less at the beginning, but it will come up later, cheaper. So that's why it's difficult for farms to access its economic potential because of the cost. Okay, only the developed countries like US, European countries, okay, Japan, they are investing more than $1 billion per year in nanotech R&D. And they are the pioneer in these technologies. For example, if you see the most developed technologies, Samsung, Apple, so they will come up with the nanotechnology stuff in the future. So what I'm trying to focus here today, the knowledge production and flow pattern is different because of the technology, interdisciplinary nature, and collaboration is different from other technical fields. Okay? So let's move on. These are the couple of examples of the nanomaterials, as I mentioned to you. Nanocrystal, nanowire, carbon nanotubes. Carbon nanotubes, different types of carbon nanotubes. For example, these are the single wall carbon nanotube, double wall carbon nanotube, multi-wall carbon nanotube, different kind of nanotubes, okay? And if you go, there are several applications. How can we apply these materials into different sectors? As I talked to you that the graphene enhanced carbon fiber, reinforced polymer, that it can be applicable to the aircraft body of the aircraft, or automobile aircraft, automobile bodies. And there are some other nanomaterials can be used as a transistor, as a memory device, display lighting technology, sensors, solar technology, flat panel displays, supercapacitors, batteries. So these are the carbon nanotube TV. So in the future, now we are using LED. light emitting diode, LED TV. Okay. Before that we had LCD TV. Before that we have plasma TV. Is it? And before that we have analog TV. Okay. So can you see the life cycle of these technologies? After analog, there are a couple of changes. Plasma, there's no more now. Plasma only stays only a couple of years, 2, 3, 4 years. Plasma disappeared. And then LCD, liquid crystal. LCD disappears, now LED. In the future, LED will be disappeared. And who will replace? Next is carbon nanotube TV. And LED TV is like thin TV now. And carbon nanotube TV is like paper, like this. So you can bend it, like in a projector here, that you can bend it, carry with you, and then you can go anywhere and then take it through the wall anywhere. And there is a carbon nanotube TV in the future coming up. There are a couple of prototypes here. You see, these are the prototypes of mobile phones, okay, smartphones. I visited China. It's called Tsinghua Foxconn Nanotechnology Center in Tsinghua University campus. Okay, and they have these prototypes, and these prototypes is carbon nanotube display. So people, you have a smart phone like iPhone, Apple, and what is the display called? Retina display. Is that right?
Yes.
Retina display. So this will be replaced and distracted by carbon nanotube display in the future. So they have the prototypes now. So in the next 5 years, I think you can see the carbon nanotube display. So this is coming up, okay? That's a revolutionary coming up, okay? So what I'm talking about, these are the technologies. So I want to show how different scientific fields are merging together to exploit this technology. So this is one of the my research outputs. It's published in Technological Forecasting and Social Change. So at the beginning, 1980s, it's called Nano Discovery Age, because Sumio Ejima from Japan, NEC company, okay, Nippon Electric Company, NEC, he discovered carbon nanotube for the first time. And that is a nano discovery, and then fullerene discovered in Sussex, Sussex University, and so that is the nano discovery in 1990s, where different disciplines are separate. Physics, chemistry, biology, medicine, they are different, they are separate unit. Okay. After the 1990s, nano leveling starts by scientific research. Although the physicists and chemists, biologists, they are started to relevel their research called nano. Because for example, if I'm a chemist, like I'm working in plasma, okay, or something, plasma technology or something, colloid. You see colloids, but suddenly they're releveling their research as a nano because of the hype and then attracting funding. So, and then in 2000, nano fusion starts. Nano fusion already complete here. How fusion starts? Because as I talked to you, if you exploit this nanotechnology, you have to work together, collaborate with other fields, and that way they are collaborating. And how it happens? How can we found that they are collaborating? They are fusing together different science fields. If you see that the trend in 1990s, their mostly output is their own disciplines. 98%, 97%. They are publishing their output is in their own discipline journals or own discipline outlet. Okay, but if you see now 2014 mid 2000, they are not publishing their own disciplines. They are publishing in something multidisciplinary journals like who are publishing interdisciplinary journals. So they are fusing. They are relocating. For example, I'm a physics professor. Okay, I'm not staying in the physics department. So I'm just relocating myself in where I can collaborate with other people because I'm working in nanotechnology. So I'm not calling him a physicist. I'm working with biologists, chemists, physicists like that. Right. So what method I use? Actually, I use a text mining method, okay, which is a technology, text mining and data mining. Okay, and usually I have we used a database called Thomson Innovation Database. There are also a database software called Thomson Innovation Data Analyzer and Vantage Point. So it's a kind of innovative method for analyzing and forecasting advanced technologies or emerging technologies. Because we have to forecast. Because if you want to see what will happen after 5 years, after 10 years or 15 years. So we have to forecast the scenarios. Focus the advanced technologies or emerging technologies, what will happen. So how can we learn? How can we formulate policy recommendations to the government or something like that, funding organization or regulatory bodies. So these are the couple of pictures. For example, this is the technologies, patents. So we download the patents by using the software, and we analyze and we see the different pictures, network analysis, visualization, okay, this sort of thing we did. So I just wanted to show a couple of slides from recent research. So we downloaded 49,000 patents, nanotechnology patents, by using a Thomson data analyzer. And we found the technological trend, you see, from 1990s. So this is earlier stage, this is growth stage, and this is maturity stage now. Okay, these are the trend. And we found 73,000 inventors, 29,000 organizations in 68 countries. Okay, and of course, United States are leading, 41%, Japan 29%, Korea, China is emerging countries. Okay, in this field. So what are the analytical framework? We define any innovation. Innovation may have different collaborative innovation mechanisms that lead to productive innovation system. So what can be? What kind of collaboration mechanism should be? So we hypothesize it should be either monolinkage or linear, and then oligolinkage, central, decentral, and distributed linkage. So this is our hypothesis, and let's see what's going on in this technological field, technical fields. And we found interesting results. For example, we took 3 samples, nanocrystal, nanowire, and nanotube technologies. Okay, as you see this picture, this is the graphical representation. This is the most cluster. This is the cluster. You see, only straight line, only monolinkage, linear collaboration. You see. And that cluster is highly decentralized linkage with even United States and France, CNRS and United States, MIT and University of California, Pennsylvania. With a highly decentralized linkage, again, is mostly Japan and United States. Oligolinkage you can find here, and then also decentralized linkage, something here, nanospace. But interestingly, we found here nanowire, highly centralized linkage based on Samsung. You see, Samsung is at the central point surrounding that. And monolinkage we found University of Tsinghua and Honghai, that is Foxconn company based Taiwanese firm. That I showed you the prototypes. Okay, the only Tsinghua and Foxconn they are collaborating only. So that means only 2 actors they are collaborating. That's why it's linear. And also a couple of clusters are decentralized. So you see, most of the clusters are decentralized. We found decentralized and centralized. Okay. So the decentralized structure, distributed structures are stronger than monolinkage or oligolinkage or centralized linkage, where multiple actors can work together, collaborate with each other, and that is the main success in this dealing with advanced technologies. Okay. And one of the disadvantages of centralized linkage is, for example, Samsung case. If we remove Samsung from that cluster, centralized linkage, then it will turn to monolinkage. So the Samsung is the main cause of the centralized linkage. If Samsung is out from there, you can find straight linear structures. So Samsung is the key player in the South Korean innovation system. In that way, we can also analyze what is going on in China, what is going on in the United States, what is going on in the UK innovation system. So that we looked at. So these are the examples similar to that. Okay, Samsung again, the central player. We'll come up that how national innovation system works. On the next couple of slides, I will show you. Before that, I want to show you another slide called collaboration stages. So there are different stages. So the question is, so where the collaboration starts? Is it an initial stage or transformation stage or the final stage, maturation stage? Okay. So there's 3 kinds of collaboration stages. Collaboration stage 1, idea generation stage, transformation stage, and then output or product innovation, process innovation, service innovation stage. So these are the pictures. We just finished that research by using the 2 case studies. One is Foxconn and Tsinghua case, because we found very strong monolink case. Why are they? So we want to explore things. Okay. Another is in Germany, Fraunhofer Institute, and how it plays the role in German innovation system. So these are the examples we just finished, and these are the prototypes as I mentioned to you. So these are the retina display, waterproof. Okay. Can anybody see? This is the what is this? Can you anyone can guess what is this?
Like a see-through glass.
Sorry?
It's a see-through glass.
The see-through glass. Anything else? What is this? Is it computer monitor or something else? Flex monitor? No? But that's not the case. This is a sound system. So it's transparent fiber, and that creates sound. You know, instead of we have big sound box, sound system you can play in the wall, like a just fiber, or that type of just transparent fiber, and that creates sound. So this is again comes from carbon nanotube and nanowire. Okay, and how they prepare by this again that company they're doing. So now this slide shows the national comparative study of national innovation system. So we understand what's going on in actor levels, okay, and now we understand broad perspectives within the country what is going on. So I'm just because of time constraint just focusing on here. If you see collaboration mechanism in the UK, collaboration mechanism in China, and United States, and in Germany, the 4 countries. Okay. What's the difference you found from these 4 national players and 4 national countries? If you see clearly, in the UK, the innovation systems, for example, in the collaboration works, funding organizations, EPSRC, ESRC, RC UK Research Councils, and they are collaborating with academia and industry. European funds is coming also through academia and industry. And there are intermediaries and advisors, regulatory bodies there. They are also connecting with academia and industry. There are certain players like intermediate organization, for example, Nano KTN or TSB, Technology Strategy Board. These are the intermediate organizations who took fund from the government and split into academia and industry. So in this case, in the UK, so intermediary is an essential actor who plays a greater role in exploiting this such kind of technologies. But on the other hand, if you see China and the US, a different figure. For example, they don't have intermediaries. So they are directly funds from the government, they are directly funds to the university or industry, or directly coming from venture capital firms or some other firms. They are not bothering on intermediaries. So you see the national innovation system related to high-tech industry like such nanotechnology, China and UK's innovation systems are almost similar. Whereas you can say the European countries like UK and Germany, they are almost similar. Because they also have intermediate, like here in Germany, Fraunhofer plays an important role as an intermediate organization. So in Europe, they are required by the actors called intermediate organizations to play the role. So these are the some, I just want to summarize here. So we found Asian actors are the leader in electronic industry, for example, Samsung, Korean, and also Taiwanese firm Foxconn and then Tsinghua. Also we found the large corporations, the key actors, because it's a really matter of the funds and then a huge investment, R&D investment, so you have to have money to play with. And shared fund in the United States and EU, yes, this plays a key role, whereas direct investment in Asia. For example, Chinese and South Korea, the direct investment in the company and industry, but where in the EU, European or US, people are using shared fund. Okay. So USA, you found the national cluster rather than the network. So US, they have national cluster. For Silicon Valley, Peter talks about Silicon Valley, one of the clusters. Okay. They have, like in Boston cluster and California cluster, there are several national clusters instead of rather than network. But here in the US or European countries and Asia, the networks we found, decentralized networks, centralized networks. Okay. In China, mostly we found linear network. In Japan and Korea, we found decentralized and centralized network. And also we found that new funding system for the stages of collaborations. For example, when you talk about the different stages of innovation, and systems of innovation is similar in the US and China, but similar in European countries. We found that. And this is the interesting find of results from our research in this area. Thank you very much for your attention. Any questions?
No, we did something very efficiently. We actually worked all the way through our coffee break. So we made an organisational innovation already. So that means we do have some time for discussion. If we have how many speakers do we have left? We have, is Lynn here? No, we have Peter and Nazrul. Shall we have 10-15 minutes discussion with them, questions with them? Yeah, if you two guys like to stay up here.
Sure.
And I think we heard some very exciting, let's say, glimpses of the future. What I have to say, looking at one of your last slides there, I became incredibly depressed because I realized what I think everybody in academic life knows, that much of the innovation in higher education in this country has been driven through links with the EU, and that after Brexit we're in a much worse place. But if I could start with one particular question to you. You didn't put KTP, Knowledge Transfer Partnerships, specifically in the UK model. Now, I found over many years KTP, and before that Teaching Company, is one of the best ways for higher education to work with industry. Why didn't you put it in?
What happened? This is our result based on the technology analysis, like patent analysis. Yeah. And then we found these are the actors plays a key role. KTP, of course, they have a small role, but not taking the broad perspective. I'm saying the intermediary organization, broad they're playing the key roles actually. But KTP is there within that boundary, but I did not show it.
Okay.
Can I give you an alternative?
Yes.
If you go around industry, in the UK and most of Europe, you say, do you have PhD students? They'll say no. And why not? Well, the academics are clueless about critical path. The students are not well managed, and they just want to do what they want to do. And so we don't do it. So I set up a program where I'm starting to take PhD students into companies to solve a specific problem very quickly, because that's part of the student training. The student then has to be funded by the company for the remaining part of the 3 years to deeply study that topic, to really understand it, because there's a big difference between an engineering solution and understanding. And immediately industry has sort of warmed to that idea. The other observation is, if you look at Cambridge as an example, the actual knowledge transfer to industry is pretty low. What actually tends to succeed is an entrepreneurial academic and a few people from the outside grab hold of an idea and make it happen. There's a big problem. Big companies want to work with big companies. They don't work very well with small companies. It's a bit of a conundrum. The other big problem in the UK is it's actually quite difficult to oscillate in and out of education and industry. In the United States it's the norm. And a lot of industry is sniffy about academic success, and a lot of academia is sniffy about people out of industry. The reality is, of humanities programs, the vast majority of our discoveries and our developments have come out of big problems of industry that had to be solved. That's what's really happened, and yet people sort of don't seem to get the model. But all this, there's a benchmark. I didn't say anything when you made your presentation, but absolutely spot on. I saw all of those technologies being developed 30 years ago, 25 years ago. So what people don't understand is, from the first discovery to something hitting the market is a long time usually when it comes to fundamental stuff. So I can remember having one guy working on quantum dots in 1995, and only now have quantum dots popped up as a reality.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, I could tell a similar story about heat pipes. But the technology's been known for 40 years. When I was in charge of group development in a double glazing window company, we looked at heat gain technologies, essentially direct gain through coatings on regular windows. It can be done. It could have been done 40 years ago.
That's right.
But anyway, this is three old men talking. Questions, please.
I have a question.
Please, far away. Yeah.
As we know, business success requires innovations, and innovation needs different thinking or new ideas.
Yeah.
We see some societies don't appreciate new thinking or new ideas.
Yeah.
In that moment, how business grow?
With great difficulty. I mean, what tends to happen is if people don't innovate, there are several things. The competition grows. A good example is the supermarket sector or the oil companies or anything else. It gets to the point where the profit margins get to somewhere in the region of about 3 or 4%. M&A starts, mergers and acquisitions. You've got to be big to live with the 3%, 2.5% profit margin. So way back when I joined the telecommunications industry, the profit margin was like 22%. And I gave a presentation to the board of BT in the 90s, and I said, something's really got to give. I said, look at the trajectory. We're going from telco to Tesco. We're going to be at a 3% profit margin, and before I left, I think it had got down to something like 7%. And that makes a big difference. So if you're not an innovator and you keep creating new products and you keep trading off the old, the market shrinks. So you've got to keep creating stuff. But there's something that has happened that is quite magic, and I phrase it like this. In big companies, the suits and the sandals can no longer live together. There used to be a time where total integration would work. You even had companies like Ford who would take the iron and they would refine it and they would make nuts and bolts and all that stuff. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work, because you need an R&D team on fastenings and fixtures alone, or drive chains or anything. So this fractalization is interesting. Here's an experiment you can run. Go to electrical goods warehouse and open the door of every oven and look at them, and you'll find the 3 kinds of oven and about 50 different kinds of door. So what happens, there's a plant somewhere, in fact there's only about 3 plants or 2 plants, it's something like that, in Europe, that makes domestic appliances. So they're stamping out ovens and washing machines and tumbler dryers, and it's all the same kit. And there's a bit of styling different, a different badge, and they stick a different door on it at the last minute. And so you pay an extra £300 for a door. So it sort of collapses very, very quickly to a small number. If we didn't do that, we would not get such great quality products at such an incredibly low price. Let me give you an engineering perspective. Rolls-Royce used to make all their engines by hand, and the pistons, the pots, would have a little hole in the top with a cap, and used to put little lead weights in to balance them all up so that the vibration was minimized. None of that is done anymore, because the manufacturing processes that don't have human beings in it, it's all an automated machine, make exactly the same product over and over again. When you put the engine together, you don't have to adjust diddly squat. It comes out better than a Rolls-Royce engine ever was. And now if you buy a Rolls-Royce car, it's got a BMW engine in it. If you buy a Volvo, it may have a BMW engine or a Ford engine, and it's just the lid at the top that is changed. But it works. But there's a dependency there that our politicians do not understand, that globalization is one, a manifestation of a shortage of resources and a need to do more for less. Here's what fits with this presentation. We will never create a sustainable future for humanity by polishing our existing industries. It's fundamentally impossible. Without nanosteels, and by the way, The biggest number I can find for plastic aircraft is 53%, and it's a British, not a British, it's an Airbus Industries aircraft, and they're gradually taking out the metal and they're becoming more and more plastic. So the metal skin is incredibly thin, and the robots for printing the wings are really worth going to see. Human beings couldn't do it. These are absolutely big changes, but our problem is our politicians don't get out much. And you hear silly statements like the Cambridge Science Park is going to take out Silicon Valley, give us a break. Here's a question for you to answer if you can. How come Europe, the entire Europe, does not have a single big internet success? You cannot name for me a 200 billion company on the internet out of Europe. If one is 200 billion now, it's bought by the Americans, like Skype. Why? Because when you go and work in Silicon Valley, let me tell you, if you stand up and shout India or China or Europe, the place falls apart. It's absolutely an international community, par excellence. So it's sort of very interesting, but you can't, people don't understand it. They really don't. It's dangerous, I think.
I also wanted to add one more thing. As I mentioned to you, that you were saying that if there is no creativity, no new ideas, so how can business sustain, how can business run? Of course, so as I mentioned to you, that it should be, business will sustain, but it will be stagnant, it will be equilibrium, okay? There is no new product, nothing, profit margin goes down, at a certain time it's just as usual, it's stagnant. So what will happen after that? Then you have to have some disruption on that stage or something, to have some new player ideas or policies or new equipments, new materials to have to come up sort of, new business. Otherwise it will be stagnant. It will be stagnant, no business, nothing.
I sometimes say to the technology naysayers, tell me a technology you can live without. Pick any technology. Which could you live without an X-ray machine, an MRI scanner? If you switch the electricity off, we'll die. Without electricity, the population of the planet is going to be much less than 1 billion. You can't produce food, you can't distribute it, you can't do anything. You can't make goods. So, which technology are you going to say, let's stop everything because this is too hard, Okay. Therein lies a point, not of retrenchment, but a point of disaster. People will die. It's a sort of curious argument that people do not see the benefit. The reason we are sitting here today having this discussion and doing intellectual stuff is we're not out in a field trying to catch rabbits for lunch. We don't have to go out foraging, we don't have to be farmers, we don't work ourselves to death by the age of 30. We have time to intellectualize this and think about our future. That's the benefit of the tech.
Can I ask the room, particularly the current doctoral students, what have you heard this morning that makes you think differently about the research you're going to do? Don't be frightened.
I think you should look at this. Let me just explain something to you.
Yeah. No, I want you guys to shut up. These guys to talk.
I get this with students all the time.
Yes.
We may never meet again.
No, we may never meet again.
Take opportunity to have a discussion.
Yes.
And I know, Snobby, you come from cultures where you revere professors and you won't talk. We're begging.
Don't ever do that.
Don't ever do that.
Look at us.
Come on.
Would you revere us? No. He's right. We may never hear from us again.
That's right.
What is it that you've heard this morning that makes you think about the research? Don't just think about the research you're planning to do, which is probably what your supervisor said was a good idea. That's one way of looking at your doctoral research. You think about the research that needs you. Yeah? What are you going to bring to this research? And what have you heard from these guys here? All great stuff, good stuff. I've invented a new measure. I don't think we have a measure of this. Just from hearing these two guys talk, I'm going to start some research on OSQ. You know what is OSQ? the organisational stupidity quotient. Because I'm going to try and test another hypothesis that this is related to the ROI. When the ROI is high, then that's when organisational stupidity kicks in. Because there are going to be guys at the big table, and I've sat on the board with some of these guys, they say we don't need to do this, we're making money out of this. And you say, do you ever look at the curve, the typical curve of a return on investment? Just before the curve goes down, that's when your profits are higher. I can give you two examples from British history. One is GEC, General Electrical Corporation, under the genius leadership of Arnold Weinstock, who destroyed about 30 excellent R&D departments as part of cost cutting. Where is GEC in the Fortune top 500 now? The company doesn't exist.
That's right.
Right? If you go back 1-2 generations, the North British Locomotive Company, the year before it declared bankruptcy, had a full order book. It had a full order book because it wasn't making any of its orders profitably. Right? Now, what have you guys learned this morning? So I've invented two formulas. Organisational stupidity is going to be related to Politician Ignorance Index, PII.
Love it.
Yes, which PII and OSQ positively correlated with ROI.
Absolutely.
And we think we're going into Brexit because we think we can live off our back catalogue. That's right, isn't it? That's what we think we're doing. Now, what have you guys learned from this morning? Please, don't be frightened. Don't be deferential.
I want to ask you something.
Sure, please.
You know, we have the too much dependency of the outsourcing, and we have seen some like destructive consequences when we have like you know, in British Airways they outsource everything to India, and all the flights and everything were busted, and they have to pay huge compensation. So too much dependency on the outsourcing obviously sometimes bring in a lot of problems. So what is the solution, you think?
If I could take almost everybody and put them through a basic systems course so they understood that there is a very strong link between efficiency and brittleness. So a visualization model is buy a production car from Ford or Mercedes, you can drive it very, very reliable. Now go and get a Formula F1 car, it'll get you to work once a week. The F1 is phenomenally reliable, but phenomenally efficient, but incredibly brittle. And the very inefficient machines that come off the production line are unbelievably reliable. That applies to organisations. And so it's manifest in organisations when one person makes a mistake and brings the company down. And that's what happened at the end. One guy made a mistake.
So do you think this is worth it to go for outsourcing for everything, or shall we keep?
I don't think it matters where.
Operations?
I don't think it matters, providing the system is designed well.
But you can't really rely on the internet going to work absolutely 100% all right all the time.
Well, we ought to be able to. There's no reason why not. Nothing works 100% all the time. So you put in lots and lots of contingencies. You don't put in a cable, you put in 5. And you have diverse routing. So if you go to the military, you will find, or on the space program, you have an odd number of systems running in parallel, and then there's a majority vote, and the number is at least 3, and might be as many as 7. Now, the slight systems snafu in there is that all the people who are put in separate boxes to design these systems start off with a clean sheet of paper, and they all design a different system, and you put it together. So there shouldn't be common mode errors. But guess what? There is a common mode error. All these guys and gals went to the same universities and listen to the same lectures and think in the same way. So very much their systems look a bit, if they're not identical, they look a bit. But what you do is you overcome the physical, the mechanical, the electrical failures, and you overcome all of the code problems because it's written by, and that's how you get ultra sensitivity. But I've worked on ultra safe, secure systems only to find they all run off the same power supply, and that's the common motivator. Yes. But it's all people related.
Okay, some more comments from your doctoral students.
Why do you think there can't be a simple solution to a complex problem?
Sorry, why?
Why do you think there can't be a simple solution to a complex problem?
Yeah, because we have never been able to find one. Not once. If you can find, you may find a simple solution to a very tightly controlled complex problem. You might do it, this is what the economics guys do. They find a little problem in economics, they study the heck out of it and they come up with an algorithm. Then they apply it globally and it fails. So to fully understand this, you need to get into the mathematics of it. So, you know when you were at school, draw a straight line, that's a linear system. And then they do something like an exponential function or an x squared function. They say, oh, this is non-linear. Yep, it's dead right. But it's even more non-linear in the real world, because in those three examples, if you put 1 in, you get the same answer out each time. The complexity at a higher order is you put 1 in now and you get an answer. In an hour you put 1 in and you get a different answer. And in fact you never get the same answer. And it's related to things like fractals. It looks simple, it isn't. Can we understand it? So let me give you an example that is sort of confounding. We've not been able to solve this. If you go and see a samurai sword maker, he takes a billet of metal, heats it up, spreads it with a hammer, then he folds it, and he does that 77, 75, 78, 80 times to give it strength. The Norwegians, the Vikings used to take a bar of metal and twist it, and another bar of metal and twist it, and another bar of metal and twist it, hammer it together, weld it together hot. And when you polish the sword, you get this very fractal pattern. We have no clue of how we get from the fractal pattern to the number of twists, the number of folds, and how it's put together. And so in the most recent manifestation, we have got the machines, not human beings, but we've got the machines to decode the genome. We've now got them working on protein, and the big problem is we can't solve the protein folding problem, because it's actually millions of times more complex than the genome identifying. So it's sort of what the best you can hope for is a simple solution to a difficult problem. In politics, for example, might last a little bit and will fall.
Okay, some more points.
Can I make an observation for you when you're doing your PhD? Read way outside the topic you're supposed to be looking at. And when you write up, do not report everything you've done. It'll bore the hell out of the examiner, he'll antagonise them. When you write up your PhD, you want to tell a story, and you might have done A to Z, but to get a PhD, you might only have to go A, F, T, U, sufficient, because you go on many false errands and make many mistakes. It's not relevant. The question is, what is the path of discovery you eventually went to, and what did you discover, and how is that going to improve the lot of mankind? What did we learn?
This is a question. How many people in the room, I would guess at least 1 or 2, are Muslim? Yes? Okay. Then you guys will possibly know the answer to this. What is the first true hadith?
Sorry? First true.
You know it is a hadith.
Yes.
What is the first true hadith? That is documented as coming from the mouth of the Prophet.
Yeah, you mean the first one, or what is
the first true hadith? The first true hadith.
Read and
yeah.
Knowledge.
No, it's not a hadith. That's the first word of the Holy
Quran.
Quran.
Seek for knowledge, I think.
Yeah.
Seeking knowledge.
Seek knowledge from everywhere, even from China. Is that
Even
right?
from China, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even from China.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And we could, if there are any Quranic scholars here, this is not in the Quran, it's a hadith, right? You will argue now for about 25 years about whether this hadith is true, because there are different, of course. But I think most people understand the notion of a hadith. What did the Prophet mean by this? Did he mean go to China because China is the furthest place you can think of? That's one pretty good idea. Some scholars will say this is right.
I think he emphasized on study or reading.
Study and reading.
Reading the first
Reading, yes, and perhaps the Chinese, if there are any Chinese Muslims, they will say, well, you know, in those days, even the same as now, this is where all the really good ideas started out.
Yes.
You will not have a debate with a Chinese professor that he won't convince you that the Chinese invented electricity, atomic energy, blah, 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 ceramics, you know.
Ceramics, yeah.
But this is, to back up what Peter is saying, you in your doctoral thesis, you will go through wide periods and narrow periods. I always say to my students, the narrow period is very important. If it says upgrade seminar, this does not mean you tell them all the reasons you can't do the research you first thought about. This is when you tell them what you're doing, what you did, how you'll value for money, and when you'll finish by. So don't dribble on about, oh, I had a second thought this morning, and then I thought maybe it's something to do with the fabric, and then I thought, okay, you failed it already, you failed the upgrade seminar. But in the process of going to the upgrade seminar, as Peter says, you go wide. You don't say, oh, this is not in my field, I shouldn't know it. If it's true, it's in your field. If it's interesting, it's in your field. If it's a new idea, it's in your field. So that's encouraging. In order to pass the program, you have to know everything. Or at least you have to try to know the things that you think will make your idea original. By this time you've learnt some humility and realised actually nothing is really original. Probably the Chinese thought about it 4,000 years ago. This doesn't matter, you can still be very original. When I see new technologies coming on, I think back to a time when I was working in a company and I was in charge of group development, which meant, principally, I'm looking for other companies to buy that have developed a technology that we're interested in to the point where they have made it viable, so we can see how with our management systems we can make them not just viable but profitable. Yep. That's what companies are looking for.
It is increasingly. That's right. Startup companies.
So, but then, no solar technology 40 years ago. Heat pump technology 50 years ago, basic ideas of heat pump and yet have we got a national solar program? No. Have we got a national heat pump program? Have we got a heat recycling program? No. So I think possibly for my research, politician ignorance index is going to be.
Yeah.
BII.
I like it.
I'm very fast.
Okay, shall we, Ashraful, is Ashraful here? He's in charge of timing. Are we ready to break for lunch? Or there must be some more points that you guys would like to make. You've heard such a great exposition of knowledge here. Don't feel at all frightened by that, because these guys are smart, but they're not as young as you. So.
Well, I thought you and I were 19.
19. Mentally, I'm 19. My wife says I'm not fit to go out because my mental age is actually about 12. That's fine.
You're just a little bit older than me when you go shopping, I can tell you.
Should we break for lunch? Yes? Okay. Can we have a big thank you to everybody who's been on the
So we have to be in a group for lunch. There are other people as well. So we have to take, it's self-service, we have to take our own food. And sitting in one particular area. It's in the right, left-hand side at the back. Okay? Thank you.
Do we leave will we leave?
Yeah, leave
I think so. Okay.
Leave everything here.
I